Okay, well, you can take the key and gently insert it into the ignition. And you want, whoa, 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 whoa. Hey,
You said I put it in the ignition.
I didn't say to turn it.
Let off the brake.
It's a little too, no, okay.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, we're gonna try and navigate through these.
Okay, where do I put my hands?
You put them on the wheel. Very, very careful, careful. Are you gonna hit that?
I don't think so.
Get on the gas a little bit, Not that much.
Oh, okay. Is it still underneath the vehicle?
You're good. I don't know.
Oh no, I knocked it. I knocked it down. Dang it.
I just looked in the side mirror and we could see that we have got a cone down. So
Okay.
That's a big fail.
Well, you put them too close together.
Good morning. It's good to see all of you here today. Oh, there I am. Cool. Yeah, we're starting a brand new series today called Practice, and we're grateful to Aaron and our closest thing to Steve Carell for being in our video. So we're grateful to start this Lenten season together in practice, to do things over and over and over again until we grow in a skill, or until we learn how to do something, or we learn some knowledge or wisdom, or we change the way that we live our lives. We adopt a new habit. The heartbeat of this series is really that, to incrementally, over time, grow in the likeness of Jesus, we have to practice. And so I'm glad that you're here for the beginning of this journey that will culminate on Easter Sunday, which we hope that you'll make plans to attend. And especially if you're a first-time guest with us, this is a great time to dive in. And so we'd love if you would check in, let us know that you are here today. If you check in today, you'll be put on the email list. You'll get a welcome from us, and we just want to welcome you and thank you for being a part of this community. And even if you come here every week, we'd love for you to check in and let us know you're here today, especially if you have something going on in your life and you need prayer for it, or you'd like us to walk alongside with you in something, or let us know something about what's going on with you. So again, thank you for being here today, and thank you for checking in. If you missed it and you want to check in during the service, there should be a card in the seat back in front of you that says connect, and you can scan that QR code and check in that way as well. But again, just welcome. And if we haven't met before, my name is Colin, and I'm stoked about this series. This is really what I love the most about ministry, is talking about spiritual disciplines and practices, the practices of Jesus, we call them. And that's really what we're going to talk about over the next several weeks, is how to practice what Jesus teaches. So in that spirit, let's pray together. God, we thank you for your example and your teachings and your guidance and your command in Jesus, to walk with you, to become more like you, to love you, to be with you, and to be shaped by you, to yield to you, to surrender. Ask that in this moment, you would help us surrender to whatever you want to do in our lives, what you want to cultivate in us, what practices you want to give us, what life you want us to have. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Jesus says in two different places in the Gospels the impact of practicing the way that he teaches. In Matthew 7, Jesus says, if you do these things, and he's pointing back through these last two chapters, this whole sermon, we call it the Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5 through 7, Jesus says, if you do these things, this is paraphrasing, it'll be like you built your house on a solid rock. But if you don't, it's like you're building your house on sand. It's going to be swept away by external circumstances. The wind will come, the rain will come, and it'll be swept away. But if you do these things, you're building a solid foundation. Hold that in mind over these next several weeks, that what we're doing when we practice is not trying to work our way into being valued and loved by God. We're not trying to work our way into being an important spiritual person, so when others look at us, they say, ooh, ah. We're trying to build in our own lives a foundation that we can build our personal lives on, and our families' lives, and our work on. And if we do these things that Jesus commands, it's like building a solid foundation. And no matter the external circumstances, there's something solid there. Or in John 13, Jesus says, if you do these things, you'll be blessed. But there's something deeper that happens to you, that if you follow Jesus' command, either by what he says or what he does, your life will be blessed. And there's a particular way of thinking about that blessing that God grants us. There's one is that solid foundation, but two, your life will be different. And again, the goal is to become more like Jesus, to become a person of love, and that's the blessing, is that you then get to be an outward-oriented, love-oriented person. Again, that's where we're going to begin and end this series, and especially on Easter, that we want to build our life on who Jesus is and what he taught and what he practiced and what he commanded. Today, each week, we're going to talk about a different practice. Today, we're going to talk about fasting. And I wrestled with this all week, and I talked to my wife about it and talked to friends and family and some other colleagues. Inevitably, when the topic of fasting as a spiritual practice comes up, you run right into Western diet culture. And you run right into conversations we have about body image and shame people feel about their bodies. And I just really want to be upfront from the beginning of today's sermon that, one, a lot of that stuff is so damaging and evil and awful. And you are beautiful, created in God's image. And I hate especially that it comes a lot of times from people who are in the church that say ugly, nasty things about how people's appearance is. But I also want to say that I don't want to focus a lot of attention on that because I'm not qualified to talk about medically eating disorders or body image stuff. But I do want to point you to, if you go to our website, brancheshdx.org/practice, and scroll to the bottom, we're going to have a block for each practice. On the fasting practice, I've shared a podcast, a really great conversation between Bethany Allen at Bridgetown Church and somebody that is qualified to talk about those things. And so if that's something that you're confronted with in your life, I want to point you to that resource and not pretend that I know what I'm talking about, but also want to make us feel free and light under the kind of weight of the ugliness in our world that talks about those things. So just want to preface with that, okay, and point you to that resource. And if you can't find it, reach out to me. I'd love to point you to it. But I also want to begin with the end in mind, that diet culture in the West may change the way other people see you. Fasting changes the way you see. That's the headline today. Diet may change the way people see you. That's, of course, the intended goal for a lot of people. Fasting as a spiritual practice changes the way that you see. When we talk about spiritual practices, inevitably, we, again, are confronted with, okay, I love the idea of fasting. I love the idea of prayer. I love the idea of reading the Bible. I really love the idea of silence and solitude. How? Where can I find that time? What's the first step? I can't bear the weight of these practices. I'm not a holy enough person. I'm not a good enough person. I'm not a religious enough person, but I really want to implement this stuff if it does bear fruit in my life, if it does build a foundation, if it is freeing, if it does bless me, but where do I start? And this week when I was thinking about this and wanting to give people practical, helpful, light wisdom when it comes to spiritual practices, I thought about a passion of mine, which is board and tabletop games. Yes, Sean is putting his arms up. So I now know, Sean, if I ever need to invite someone to play a game, you're in. There's a dark side to this hobby, which is getting around people who are new to the hobby in general, or you have a new game on the table, and the weight of having to explain this game to them. Landon can identify my soul leaving my body when I'm explaining to our friends and family a new game, and I'm just like, nobody actually cares about this. I'm trying to help. And then you get to the point where you say, like, let's just play a couple of rounds and see how it goes. That's wisdom for spiritual practices, by the way. Give it a shot, and you're not going to do it right or perfect the first time, but you can reassess. It's just like that in a board game. And I saw this TikTok this week, I think really helpfully illustrates what it means to practice and to learn something new. So take a look.
So easy. I'll teach you. It's just rock, paper, scissors. It's a really easy game. It's called Rock, Paper, Scissors. It's an easy game. I'm going to teach you how to play.
Is there a book I can just read?
You don't need a book. There's so few rules.
Yeah, how do you play it?
Basically, it's like 1v1.
Start over.
I just started. So it's 1v1.
So some of us are just going to watch.
But there's rounds. So
We're not allowed to watch.
Let's say I was playing you, okay? Whoever wins plays the next person.
But we don't pair off.
No.
So we're playing by ourselves.
No, you're playing against one of us.
That's a pair. What's in a pair?
You're not pairing off individually. Whoever's not playing is watching.
Let's slow down.
All right, I'll slow it down, guys. Just give me a second to explain the rules.
Yeah.
It's really not even complicated.
We're giving you a second. Go.
All right, so put your hand up.
You have both hands out. Both hands?
Yeah, you put both hands up. You make a fist with one of your hands.
Hand into fist?
Yeah.
Or
No.
hand over fist? I'm sorry, it's just like my memory is like...
Who wants to learn how to play this game? Okay, so at least Lucas wants to learn how to play, so you're going to hold up your hand.
I just was.
No,
like this.
It's just going to be rock, paper, scissors 3 times.
So 3 times each. 9?
No, not 3 times each. Just
We're going to count. Rock, paper, scissors.
We're not going to... Just do what I'm doing. You're just going to go rock, paper, scissors, and on shoot, you're going to pick one of 3.
And now we're shooting.
Now he's wanting me to shoot.
It could be whatever. It could be throw. It could be choose.
It's more like a song than a game, I guess.
It's not a song.
But it's got a driving beat, sort of like a song.
There is a rhythm to it, yes. But that's not
I'm
important.
not good at rhythm games, honestly.
It's not a rhythm game. It's just, here's the game. You go rock, paper, scissors, shoot. You gotta pick
So
one
it's
of...
a faster tempo.
I still haven't gotten to the 3 gestures. It's
Wait,
not...
what have you been doing for 10
I've been answering your
minutes?
questions. I've been answering every question you have.
Okay, is yelling a rule?
I'm just gonna go fast. You go rock, paper, scissors, shoot. You're going to pick one of 3 gestures.
Whoa,
It's
whoa,
gonna
whoa.
be it's gonna be rock, scissors, or paper.
Show me your hands again.
Rock. See how it looks like a
What's
rock?
the next one? I got rock.
Paper. Paper, paper, scissors.
That's scissors?
Yes!
Is that a verb or a noun?
It's scissors. It's like you cut with. Then there's paper.
That's paper?
This is paper.
Why is what is this part of the paper?
It does. That's just you.
What is this part of the paper?
It's not. It's just a handout. Handout.
What is it, a handout?
No. It's not.
That's it. That's the whole thing. Yeah. I heard a pastor say one time, it would be the worst job in the world to be a pastor, and what you were trying to do is just get people to do things they don't want to do. And that's sometimes what it feels like, to teach someone a new game or a new skill. Is like they really don't want to, but they feel obligated because they're your friend or you invited them to or whatever else. So you're just like, no, you're really going to love it. Just try it. Just do this next step. And they're asking all these questions, and it can be very overwhelming. And fasting is our way into thinking about spiritual practices. I think it's a great place to start because it's a mystery to a lot of us. It's a weighty one. It has cultural baggage to it, like we talked about at the top of the sermon. It is confusing. It's difficult physically. It's part of our physicality. And so, we, not to make a pun, but we bite off more than we can chew sometimes. Like, I'm going to try to fast all this length of time, and I've never fasted before. And it feels overwhelming to just like, okay, I need to be open. I need to struggle with it. I need to work for it. I need to put this thing into practice because my pastor says so, and that's not it at all. The church often focuses first primarily on what's up here, like that what you should believe something, and you should think these things, you should adopt these opinions, and less of the weight, especially in the Western church, is on what we should do. I want to avoid thinking about that what we're doing, again, makes us more important or special or in the eyes of God more valuable, but again, to drive the point home that these practices, and fasting in particular, doesn't just change the ways that other people see us, but the way that we see our perspective in the world. I've been reading this book called Dopamine Nation, and in it, the author says that we've lost the ability to take the little pain to cure the big pain. We have some pain in our life, maybe some spiritual longing, some big thing happening in our life, some weight, and we want to add, we want it to be changed, we want it to be different, but we don't want to endure any more pain. Fasting is a little pain that I think can cure a big pain. We're looking at a variety of practices, and we say the practices of Jesus because they're things that Jesus did or commanded. And I want to just read 2 short verses today for the practice of fasting, because it's really the beginning of Lent, and this is where we get the season of Lent from. So we're in Matthew chapter 4, the first 2 verses. It says this: "Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished." This is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. The 40 days of Lent mimic or are outlined by Jesus' 40 days in the wilderness. He begins his ministry, he's pushed out into the wilderness, and he fasts for 40 days. And most scholars would agree that Jesus literally didn't eat or drink anything for 40 days. So it was really, in some way, one of Jesus' first miracles, that he could miraculously live for 40 days with no food or drink sustenance at all. But it also becomes the outline for us in this journey with Jesus to the cross and ultimately to the resurrection. And it mirrors also Moses fasted for 40 days when he was waiting to get instruction for the law from God. And across the Old and New Testaments, from the very beginning of the Bible to the end of the Bible, we see a pattern of people fasting for a variety of reasons. And we call these the practices of Jesus again because they're things that Jesus either exemplified, things that he did as we see here, or they're the things that he explicitly commanded. Again, it's Jesus working in us and changing us and transforming us in us an ability to see the world in a different way, in fact, to see the world that he sees it, not to be seen in a different way. I want to break fasting down into these 4 component parts. The first one is really deeply practical in this service-oriented place. Fasting puts us in solidarity with the poor and the hungry. People that fast for secular reasons, if we want to use that word, or for other spiritual, ideological reasons, often this is the center point. There are people who are hungry. There are people who will go without a meal today, and to fast puts them at front of mind for us, our care and love for them, our attention on them, our then drive to serve them and to feed them and to give to them. This happens in the Bible in Isaiah 61. In fact, this prophet, he says, "This is the fast that I have chosen." So he uses this explicit word fast. But then he goes on to describe not only withholding food from himself, but to break the bonds of the oppressed and to set the captive free. His fast is linked with justice in the world. So when we're fasting, when you think about taking up the practice of fasting, if that motivates you, put that at the center of your fasting practice, to be in solidarity and empathy with and attention to the poor and the oppressed in the world. Second, we find, and again, I'm no expert, but in my research and trying to understand the fasting practice and why it pops up in cultures all over the world, is it brings some mental acuity or focus. People that practice sorts of spiritual fasting or some sort of bodily transformation in fasting find that they're more focused, find that they're able to pay attention to one thing, are then grounded in their body. It's a body grounding practice. We say unto the whole person in the Christian church, that we're not just kind of spiritual beings and our bodies are like taxi vehicles kind of taking us around the world. We are physical beings. And fasting grounds us in our physicality that God has gifted us with. Third, fasting is often in the Bible a response to a humbling event, sometimes a traumatic event, or an embarrassing event, or an event that makes you feel, 1 foot tall. People fast in response to feeling like, I'm actually not as important as I thought I was. I'm actually not as cool or special as I thought I was. And you fast to deprive yourself of eating for a period of time so you can properly see that. Again, fasting doesn't change just the way people see us. In fact, it primarily changes the way that we see the world, including ourselves and our place in it. And fourth, and the one I really want to drive home for us, is fasting offer ourselves in offering to God. I heard a pastor say this week that fasting helps us see where we end and God begins. We just observed this on Lent, or on Ash Wednesday, this past Wednesday, that we are mortal beings. We're finite beings. We have limits. And one of those limits is we need food, we need sustenance to live. And when we deprive ourselves from food or drink for a certain period of time, and we feel hungry, the ideal situation is that hunger, that feeling, that physical change would draw our minds back to God and to our limits, and then our dependence on Him. That without food, without the life that comes from consuming food, we would pass away. And again, in solidarity with the poor, people who are actually hungry, we're reminded that we rely on God's sustenance, God's enough for us. I went to a wedding with Landon in California several years ago. And Landon's good friend Claire, it was a beautiful wedding. They had the most beautiful charcuterie I've ever seen. Yeah. I dream about this charcuterie. I bring it up. Landon is taking a picture right now to send to Claire because I bring it up so often. She's like, he's talking about the charcuterie again. Amazing. I have it favorited on my phone just so I can look at it. And I thought this week, our world is much like this charcuterie. This variety, this overabundance. It was one of those things like, I felt like a little kid again where I'd be like, don't eat too much, you're gonna make yourself sick. And I happily made myself sick on this charcuterie, because there was so much and it was so beautiful. I gotta stop turning around, one, because it's bad for your experience. And two, if I'm gonna start drooling, I'm gonna be totally just fixated on the charcuterie. Fasting, as a spiritual practice, cuts out our ability to just be full all the time. And it links this physical feeling of being without of deprivation to a spiritual deprivation that we feel. That there's an abundance of resource for us to spiritually grow. There are apps, there are books, there is time to be in prayer and silence. And we deprive ourselves of food in the practice of fasting with Christians of the past to draw our attention back to God, to not engage in the charcuterie attention economy of the world where we could just be constantly filled all the time with anything all the time, just resist being bored. We just got to fill our lives with everything and just look at the world in this way. We respond to our physical deprivation and fasting with now what we call hanger, that we can redirect back toward our longing for and our need for God. Our abundance and excess is met with, again, our limits. Fasting is foreign to us, but it's not foreign to the Christian church of the past. If you read in the Gospels, Jesus has a conversation with a man who thinks he's very religious and important. And Jesus says, okay, what do you do? How do you practice your religion? And one of the things he lists, he says, I fast 2 times a week. It was common in that first century Jewish community to fast on Wednesdays and Fridays. Very common. And the Christian church in the very first centuries reclaimed that practice, said that's part of our heritage, that's part of who we are. We're going to fast every Wednesday and Friday. It's actually more recent, in the more recent past, that people stopped doing that, stopped fasting 2 times a week. I'm saying this, and some of you are just like, please don't say it. Please don't say you guys should fast 2 times a week. The beauty, the goodness of the fasting practice is that it can be implemented and integrated into our life in a variety of ways. All across religions, all across ideologies, all over the world, people have found value in fasting, and this is the place that I would start. First, again, if you want to go to our website and look up the practice page, brancheshtx.org/practice, you'll be able to see resources for every single practice. And fasting is up now, and it has a conversation or a short video of a couple and their journey through the fasting practice, a guide from Practicing the Way, has a sermon from Rich Velotis, has a link to a book by Scott McKnight that I think is really, really helpful and really short insight into the practice of fasting. But here are my tips. Here are my foundations for fasting for us. First is start small. Yes, we can do that. Miss a meal. Or have 1 meal in the morning and don't break your fast again until sundown at dinner. A very common way of fasting. Or if you feel up to it, don't eat during the day on Wednesday or Friday and connect yourself to the ancient practice. But start where you are. Don't start for where you want to be, or you think you should be, or you think I think you should be, or where your neighbor think you should be. And certainly don't start in a place that's going to do damage to yourself or your body, or your psychology, or to your emotions, or to your spirit, or to your past, or to your own story. Start where you are. And again, part of starting where you are is if fasting is not for you, fasting is not for you, and you don't have to do it. It's not a requirement, but it could be helpful. Second, spiritual practices, and this is a good place to start for these next several weeks, spiritual practices should be about subtraction, not addition. I don't want to make you more busy. I don't want to burden you. I've said this before. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest for your souls. If any of this feels like a burden to you, it's not from God. It's not from Jesus. It's not the invitation that Jesus offers to feel light. And so if fasting feels like a burden to you, feels like you'll add too much to your life, don't do it. It's about subtraction, not addition. The third one, if you are going to step into it, if you are going to try the practice of fasting with your neighbors, with your friends, with your small group, I say this, don't dabble. Don't fast-ish. If you're going to do it, actually do it. Commit maybe with a friend and accountability to say, okay, we're not going to eat during the day on Wednesday or Friday, and we're going to check in with each other about it. I'm going to fast this week. There'll be a video that'll come out at the beginning of the week where I talk about fasting, and then there'll be a video at the end of the week of me saying, here's how it's going. Stay tuned. Spoiler, I don't think I'm going to be stoked about it. But I want to redirect that energy into my dependence upon God. Don't dabble. Fourth, if you're doing, not dabbling, we know psychologically that these sorts of adoptions of new skills, especially small pain that might help change a larger pain or change our lives or transform us spiritually, it's a J curve. That is to say, it gets worse before it gets better. You're going to be like, I'm stoked, it's Lent, it's time for me to fast, be great, and it's going to dip. And you're going to be like, this is the worst. I can't believe Colin talked about this and told me to do this. I hate him. I'm never going back. But if you commit to it, I promise, the fruit is there that you'll experience something. Even if the Psalms are replete with this, God, this is the worst, but I'm relying on you, I'm yielding to you, I'm surrendering to you. That's good spiritual practice, but it's a J curve. And the last one is repetition. If you're like, okay, I'm going to fast on Wednesday, and then Colin's going to talk about another practice on Sunday, and I can be done with that. If really you think this might be of value to you spiritually, don't just do it one time and be like, check, I've done the fasting practice. There's resources, again, on the website where you can connect with other people to fast in some pattern, in some way for the next 4 weeks, or through the rest of Lent, or perpetually to always fast on a certain day of the week if you want to do that. And we know through spiritual practice, through saints of the past, we're not reinventing the wheel, we're not starting from the bottom. We stand on the shoulders of people who've been fasting for centuries, that over the course of time, it becomes even if it's frustrating, even if it's hard, even if it's not something you would necessarily choose for yourself, in community, in accountability with others, has an impact spiritually. I want to land where we began. Again, the goal is not that you fast and you become a cover model or something like that. We reject and in the face of the superficiality of our culture say this is not what fasting is about, and it should not be your motivation for fasting. But it does change the way you see the world, whether that's the way you view the poor and the oppressed in the world, whether that's the way you view yourself and your limits and your humility, or whether that's the way that you view your dependence upon the God who feeds us, who cares for even the sparrows. I want to encourage you, and I want to have conversations with you about how you can implement fasting into your life so that we, with Jesus, could yield to surrender to the goodness of a God who provides, a goodness of a God who feeds us, a goodness of a God who's given us enough to share with the world, a goodness of a God who made us physical, hungry beings that he might make us hungry for more of him.